Hello everyone. So this is going to be a little tutorial, a quick tutorial for hopefully somebody that might find it useful. There's been a lot of people transitioning from Microsoft Flight Simulator that has all the flight plan capabilities onto X-Plane. So I hope this is going to be of help for people trying to add a little bit of planning to their simulation. So by using, there's many different tools out there that can be used. I personally use Simbrief and Navigraph, which together are an incredible tool to flight simulation, especially of course when it comes to flying airliners. Not as much for small GA, but for airliners definitely is it's a very good base to have. Simbrief is completely free, while Navigraph is subscription based, so it's £10 a month or $10, I don't remember which is, but it's definitely money well spent, and it really helps with the planning. Now, starting from Simbrief, so the difference between Simbrief and Navigraph, Navigraph can do a little bit of flight planning as well, but Simbrief gives you everything you need in terms of calculates the height, calculates the fuel you need based on the airplane you're using. So it gives you an actual, practically a like for like copy of an actual operational flight plan that real operators will use. And Navigraph then puts that into context and shows you physically on a map how that flight plan is going to look like. So they really integrate each other. Now, starting from Simbrief, of course you need to register on Simbrief and then you'll have an account. Let's get straight into it. Now, I don't want to delve too much into all the options, so I won't sidetrack into all the different options that it has. I don't want this to be too lengthy. Just go and do a flight plan, tell you what you need to know about the flight plan, just then get to flying and get to going as soon as possible. Now, over here we have Simbrief, we go under dispatch, and we go on to the dispatch system. So we click on top, we click create a new flight, and then of course this integrates as well with many virtual airlines when you choose a flight. And I definitely would suggest joining virtual airlines. It's a great way of having some material and having ideas of where to fly, because it is a bit daunting when you sit at the desk and say, okay, where am I going to fly? While virtual airlines definitely do that, and they give you all the real world schedules. You can choose a flight and then you click on a button and it takes you automatically onto Simbrief with all the details that Simbrief needs already loaded onto, so the plane, the flight number, destination, and everything. So it literally takes just one click then to create your operational flight plan. But in this case, let's just do it from scratch so we can see what the whole process is. So when you load your new flight, you have this page over here, and we'll go through it as we fill it. Now, one thing to talk about straight away is that there are different layouts of operational flight plans. The basic one is this one, LID or LID or LIDO, however you want to call it. And then you have different operators. Now this is quite handy because based on the airplanes that you're likely to fly, I found that different operators give you the information that you need to put onto your FNC, your FMGS, in a much more visible format. And then I'll show you in a second, once we create the plan, what I mean. So this is the layout. For now we use the standard one. Then you can adjust the contingency fuel, reserve fuel, but this leave it all like that. Now, one suggestion here, you have the step climbs. So this calculates automatically the step climbs you need. If you're doing long haul, you might want, I do it quite often. Of course, very active working life, so I don't really have that much time to do long haul and sit at the desk for 8, 10, 12, 15 hours. So sometimes what you might want to try, and I do it every now and then, I do a flight and I start at night when I go to sleep. I let it fly, and I hope the autopilot behaved, and then I come back in the morning. The only thing that this one allows to is just not to have step climbs to do overnight. Of course, you're not going to be able to wake up every couple of hours and do a step climb, so we can untick this option. and that's the only thing that you're really going to use from this site. Let's try a mock-up flight plan there. Now we start with the airline, whichever that will be. We can put an EasyJet there. Flight number. Depart. Let's pretend we're departing from Heathrow, and let's pretend we're going to Glasgow, Prestwick. There we go. The alternate is already selected automatically. You can change it, but we always leave it automatic. Of course, you could change it if the weather was unsuitable, but I think it will consider the weather as well. You can as well, by hovering here, it tells you already the meter and the TAF of that destination. So that's really, really handy. Now, date. Of course, it's important that you fill this because Simbrief fetches the real world metadata. So you get the weather updated, and it's really, really reliable, especially, well, if you use things like Active Sky. If you use the default Explain 11 weather, Explain lags a little bit behind. Sometimes it's 1-2 hours behind the real weather. But for example, for Active Sky, it's really good because it's always updated. So check your date of departure and your departure time off block time, and you can adjust it if you know it's going to take you a little longer to configure or a little shorter. And normally by default it leaves you around 30-45 minutes to prepare. Then aircraft type is vital. You need to enter that. So you have a list with a huge amount of different aircrafts. You'll have all your traditional here, and you start with the codes, Airbus and Boeings and so forth and so on. You can edit the aircraft. Sometimes it's useful for the payload or slightly different performance. So you have a particular version of an A320, for example, with different performance, but that is quite advanced. You need to have really some advanced details about that aircraft. So I normally just take the standard. So you select what you're going to use. Let's pretend we're using I don't know, A321. You then have a few options here. The only ones you really going to want to fiddle with is the cost index. Now, if you don't know if you're aware what cost index is basically the balance between consumption and time. Okay, so a low cost index means that the plane, so when the FMS, the FNGC, creates the flight plan, is going to try and use the least possible fuel. That means that the flight is going to take longer, because of course you're gonna fly slower speed. So the climb profile as well and the descent profile are affected by that. But generically speaking, is lower fuel and lower speed. A high cost index will mean higher fuel consumption and higher speed. So normally you try and reflect this with reality, like Ryanair uses 6 and all different airlines use different cost index, so you can reflect what happens in reality. Or you can say, I want to get there faster, so I'll put the cost index of 50 and I'll get there faster. Otherwise you can just keep it automatic. Most of the time, if you fly for a virtual airline, that will be filled automatically with the real one. Other thing is fuel factor. Again, it's kind of advanced there. If you know that your model, your add-on airplane in the sim uses more fuel than it's supposed to, that Simbrief gives you, so you do your first 2 flights and you find that consistently, your actual airplane in the sim uses 10% more than what Simbrief tells you, you could decide to change the fuel factor to match that. Normally quite well modeled. I mean, if you use good things like Zibo and Tolis, they're really accurate, so there shouldn't be need to change this one. You have your registration if you want to change it, and the VIN number, of course, if you want your then printed flight plan to be really true to what you're flying. For the rest, we come onto here, and here it gives you already an estimated scheduled flight time, gives you the departure runway. This one is already, of course, calculated based on the wind. So if you go on here, departure, it tells you that the wind is 270 and 18 knots, and you can see it's selected runway 27. On arrival, a Prestwick, you have 24018, so runway is 30. Could be 21 or 30, probably 30 is longer. You can change that if you want, of course. Then you have extra fuel, which you could decide to put it here, or you could put it directly in the sim if you knew you were on a busy VATSIM event and you wanted to load more fuel. Altitude, normally leave it automatic. And then you can just decide your payload, so you can decide your number of passengers, cargo, or instead of passengers and cargo, just say the 0 fuel weight in total. Otherwise it's just generated randomly like this. Then over here you have the route that Simbrief decided for you. There are different options. You can try and find different options. It's good to have this one on site when you select the route, because it shows exactly what it is. Then it tells you whether it's valid. Of course, this one needs to be always green when you select. So if I were to remove that and then it did analyze, I remove a point, and then probably this one doesn't start there. It's red, of course, because I've removed the waypoint, and it tells you this airway doesn't actually, is not connected to TNT, so it doesn't work. So this one is a good double, it's good to double check this if you then manually adjust your routing. It's better just to select these, the pre-selected, and you can check here the length. So the distance, this is 310 miles. If you use this one, 311, 311, 334, so this one is longer. So you can select where to go. No, I believe, not entirely sure, but normally when I do flight plans, it takes into considerations as well winds. So in the UK, there's not much that you can do to avoid winds. But for example, in the States, it's really, really helpful. In the States, there's big jet streams up high. So like, for example, if you were in France, if there was a big jet stream here, and you were trying to fly from here to Milan, instead of going this way, it might suggest you to go down to avoid the jet stream and to get more favorable winds. So you always need to take that into consideration as well. Now, so at the beginning, of course, we will always accept what the suggestion from Simbrief is. Try, of course, one thing that I do is to try and select routes that have already the SID and the star, so that helps you just having a more complete flight plan from the get-go and not having to adjust it. So in this case, we have this one. We'll keep that one. You can have a look as well. If you click on Sky Vector, it shows you as well here on Sky Vector. You can have a first look at where it goes, but it does that on Navigraph as well, so there's no need to look at on Sky Vector. Now when you're ready and when you have everything entered, at the point you just do either you save flight, because you can save it all the time, so you can bring it up at a later time, or you can just generate operational flight plan. Confirm you wish to generate the flight plan, yes, and it's generated, and it calculates everything. And there you go. This is your actual flight plan. All the information you need is here. So this is just a summary. The airline, flight number, your aircraft, call sign, all the details that you need. You can see straight away the air time and the block time over here, the time of departure, and so forth and so on. So when you go down in the actual operational flight plan, this is exactly the format that pilots will have printed. Okay, and you have a plethora of information here and data. Now the easiest way to decrypt all this is to just go here, you see paperwork review, how do I read this flight plan? Click here and it opens up a sample of a flight plan in that format, which is in this case the Lido. And if you hover on top of each of these, it tells you exactly what it is. So there's no really shortcut, there's no short way of doing this, of learning how to read it. You just need to do this, get on this one, hover on top of every single one, and then you'll find out what they are. Okay, now, as we said, this is a Lido, which is the generic format. You can see everything here. You have your zero fuel weight, estimated and maximum. So this is what you need to enter for your zero fuel weight, and you have your total weight over here on takeoff. You have your cost index, the ground distance. You have average wind, and so forth and so on. Then you have all the fuel part, so it tells you how the fuel is split, so the fuel you need for the trip, your usual contingency, the fuel for the alternate, and the final reserve, so the classic half an hour by law. And then you just take the block fuel. Some of these things are recapped here, so are information that you find throughout the flight plan will be recapped here. On the Lido you have your routing over here. Don't get confused by this one. This is the route for the alternate, and while here you have your full route. So Heathrow 27 right, you have your seat, all the waypoints, and then you have your start and the arrival. Then if you scroll down here, you have your weight. Following the passenger sometimes is a bit misleading, because there are standard weights for passenger and their luggage according to the plane you chose, but your model is likely to differ from that. So Simbrief might consider 110 kilos per person, and your model might consider 100 kilos. That's why it's normally better to always load the plane taking into consideration just your zero fuel weight. It's a lot easier to just enter the zero fuel weight. And then you have all your flight plan here. Very useful to know, of course, what all these are. Now, as I said, there are other formats. Like, for example, if you took now, anytime you need to change anything from here, you just edit the flight. It takes you back from the previous page, and then you select what you want to change. So in this case, let's have a look at, for example, Ryanair. You generate it again. And it just gives you at this point a different format. Slightly different. This is very similar to the Lido. The only thing that was different is that when you program the FNC for the 737, you need to put the top of climb winds and the top of climb ISA. So this is very handy, for example, because it gives you here the top of climb wind and the top of climb ISA. So you have everything here, the zero fuel weight, everything you need to enter in the flight plan. If you were to do, in this case we fly in EasyJet, if you were to do EasyJet, it's a very different format. There we are. You see it looks different. Okay, and it's just getting used to. You can use the same, or you can learn 2 or 3. I normally use either British Airways or EasyJet or Ryanair, or well, the Lido if you're flying something different. Just use whatever you're familiar with. Just learn one. I would suggest probably starting with the generic one at the beginning, but then you can choose whichever. Then the second step would be then to check this plan onto Navigraph. So you switch to your Navigraph. Of course, this is the desktop version of Navigraph chart. It's the little actual program here, Navigraph. Once you open up, you just click on flight up here, and then you click on new flight, and you import from Simbrief. So Simbrief will always import the latest flight plan you've generated. So here, of course, is the one we just generated. You load that, and it's already all loaded up there. You always have your, of course, as long as it's selected in the flight plan, and we decided to select this one. The SID will always be there. You have all your waypoints. It will give you your start, but then you need to choose your runway, because here it suggested you which runway to use. So in this case, it's telling you we're going to use runway 30, but then you need to choose which approach to do. Now in this case, it's very, very simple. You have your star, and then you click here. Here you have all your options that you can change. Your arrivals are your stars, and that's already been pre-selected. And you can select your approach. In this case, when you open up, there are many different instances, many different things that can happen at this point. In this case, it's already suggesting you a selection of arrivals based, as you can see between brackets, that's TRN. So that means that it's already giving you the last waypoint of this star. Yes, if you open the chart for this star, you click there and you press on show chart. You can visualize it like that, or you can visualize it on overlay. Means it puts it on top of this. So you can see it's giving you TRN, the last waypoint is TRN. So with this star, you can use only approaches that start at TRN. You could use different ones, but they wouldn't be connected to the end of the star. Then you would need to vector yourself. So it's a lot easier to use approaches that are connected to the end of the star. So in this case, let's choose ILS 30 or ILS 12. And there we go. So that's very, very simple. Okay. Now, if you wanted to choose your star, you can have an overview of all the stars available. If you click here, show visual overviews. And then you can select different ones. So you could select, you could say, let's say in this case, for example, and you click here and they all disappear. Let's say you want to land on runway 30. Okay, so decide at 30. You don't really like this turn because it's too sharp. Frankly speaking, I don't like a turn like this. So I want to avoid that turn. So how am I gonna change that? Do I have other stars available that allows me to do something a little bit more elegant, let's say? So you open up this one and you see, well, able to be no, these no. Well, you have black 1 Papa, and that would be a smoother transition into this approach. So you can, what you can do, you can go here and choose your black 1 Papa. And there we go, and that's all changed. Now be mindful that sometimes when you change stars, if you already selected your waypoints, now all the red part is all waypoints. The green is the star, the brown is the approach. So it gives you a straight overview of what you're doing. If at this point you were to change the arrival, so if you were to select able to be, now it would only add that star. So that means that it would add the waypoint, the first waypoint, to the star. Be careful, of course, what Navigraph adds, because of course you wouldn't be able to use it like this. At this point you need to go and make sure that you delete what you don't need. So this is Blacker, which is here. Just right click on Blacker and press delete, and that fixes the flight plan. Okay. So you cannot really go around and look at this and then look at that and then look at that. Every time you select a different one, it's going to mess up your flight plan. So you need to make sure that one by one, as you select different stars, you then delete whatever has, whatever Navigraph added onto your flight plan. And that's it, and then you clean it up. So in this case we said we wanted to arrive more from the west, so we select our, of course you have an overview of which runway you want to land on, because there will be different stars. As you can see, if I select, well, here there's not many options. In Glasgow, of course, there's only a very few options, but if you select runway 03, it gives you all the suggested stars for runway 03, and so forth and so on. So we reselect our black 1 Papa, and then your approach. Then when you selected everything, oh sorry, we were going to 30. That's it. When you selected everything, you have it. At this point, you can decide to go in Simbrief and change it. If you find a better option that suits you more, you can decide to go back to Simbrief and change what Simbrief gave you. So let's switch back to Simbrief here. Let's go and edit our flight. And here we're going to type in what we want over here. So we see that the last waypoint from the previous flight plan was over here. There we are, and that was Apple. So this is the point. Apple was part of an airway, so it won't be shown. It won't be shown on your flight plan in this case. Remember that if you're taking an airway, yeah, no, actually it wasn't part of an airway, sorry. That would have been the first point. So if we go back onto, let's load again what's in Simbrief. Yeah, Apple was the beginning of the star. So you will not have it there because you go into, in this case, you're going to starting from Rebel over here, and that's what you see. If you change it at this point, our last waypoint is Rebel. If you change to Black 1P, we're going directly to Rebel to Blacker. Apple was something that stayed there from a previous, messing up all the plan. So we're going from Rebel to Blacker. So you just change that. This is Rebel, this is the last one. You remove Rebel to Papa, you add Blacker, and then you add the name of the star, which is Black 1P. So you put there Black 1 Papa, you analyze the route, and that's correct. And at this point you generate it again. There we go, you let it load. As you can see, that's changed. So if we go on Navigraph now, we do flight, new flight. Now if we click from Simbrief, of course, it will again load what is just generated here. There we go, and that's now the way you want it. You just select approach, ILS 30, and you're on. So now you know what to enter into your FMGS or FNC, whichever you're flying. We normally use this one to enter it. It's very easy actually to enter it from here. You have the operational flight plan route. So when you enter everything, you have the departure runway, you have your seat, your start, and your arrival. The only thing that you will need to look up is this one. Open Navigraph when you're selecting on your FNC the arrival, because here it tells you the VIA and the transitions, so you can check these ones over here. And that's it. Just to try another example, we can try, let's create a new flight. Let's pretend we are a speedbird. We're departing AGLL and we're arriving EDDF. Again, departure time. Let's pretend we're flying a 737-800. This looks okay. That to Foxtrot. Yeah, good departure from Heathrow, and we just generate that. And there we go. Again, as we said, we can change the weights. If you're not happy with the weight that is suggested here, you can go and edit flight, and you can decide to put only, I don't know, you want to be very light, you just select 90 passengers, no cargo. and then you generate it again. And there we are. Now at this point you can go back onto Navigraph, new flight again from Simbrief, EGLL-ADDF, perfect, and there we have it. Sometimes a big airport, so I was selecting Frankfurt because that's a lot more complicated than Prestwick. You see you have 46 arrivals, so here if you have a look at the overview, that's a lot more complicated. Then you need to kind of break it down bit by bit. You know you're coming from the northwest, so you just got to be using either these or these. All this you can ignore. But when you go and choose your approach, be careful because there are options based on different stars. So if you select your approach, in this case, let's see what Simbrief is telling us. Simbrief is telling us that we need to land on runway 25 left. Open the approaches here, go and find your 25 left, and here, as you can see, you have like gazillion of options. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to navigate here, but well, choose your ILS as we normally do, and you can see what the options are. So unless you're really familiar with where the waypoints are, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can, let's say, you can select them there, and it shows you physically how they are. So this one definitely wouldn't be a good one. You can select this one, which is good in this case. You can see if there's anything you might want to find, always one that connects directly to the star, like we did before in Prestwick. The star was connecting to the approach and you had one continuous flight plan. You can look if there's one that connects there, but it doesn't. One way to see is to check the chart of your star and see what's the name of this waypoint, and here it will tell you straight away. You can see all those arrows here, that's a vectoring, so that tells you automatically that there will not be an approach that connects directly there, so that saves you a little time. There we go. In that case, so you need that, you know that you need to select this one. It's parallel, so that's a classic vectored approach. You know that you're going to fly this arrival and then you're going to vector yourself, or VATSIM is going to vector you onto the approach. If you knew you were not on VATSIM and you wanted to try and create a continuous flight plan, you can try and fiddle a little bit with your arrivals and say, I don't know, let's see if there's anything that finishes, that ends up at, I don't know, CHA. You select this one, so you have it visual, and then you open up your arrivals. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to look through all these lines, but you can find this is your approach. It ends up here, and the only two lines that end here, well, there's 4 of them, plus all these. Well, these are all coming from the east, so they're not particularly good. And these are from the west, but that's a very tight turn. So personally, if I really wanted to do this arrival, there's no reason to do this arrival considering you're coming from the north, but it's just an example. If I wanted to do a transition to get onto this approach, I would probably choose the green line. So I could fly all the way north, get into the green line and come down. That's Kera 1 Bravo. So I close this. Let's see what happens if I select Kera 1 Bravo. Come here, Kera 1 Bravo. That's it. Yeah, it will connect. There we go. It will connect at CHA as we were looking. That's it. Of course, before getting into big airports with all these tons of options, it's good to do a little practice at smaller airports. That's pretty much it. There's 1,000 different things that you can do. Try and take the time to understand, to have a good view of the overview and understand how they work. Make sure that you're confident in manipulating these points. It just takes only a little bit of practice. Overall, you can double check that as well with what Simbrief, the options that Simbrief gives you. You can always go back and edit the flight and see if there's anything that looks slightly different. There's more routes available. They normally come from actually real routes. Like this one, you see you didn't like that Unoko, you can try this one. That looks different. Give it a try, generate the flight plan again. And then once it's loaded up, you can go back onto your Navigraph and load it again and see how it looks like. Well, that clearly doesn't look good. So if you were happy generically with this one, of course you can always remember, you can always adjust it. So you can go on to these waypoints. So this is Ritsu. You can go here, right click, delete it. Then we have Nonco, you can delete that, you can delete Tubidu, you can delete this one, and you've adjusted it. At this point you could potentially keep the same. Know that you need to keep Matug and then Rollis. So you can go here, edit your flight plan. Matug is at the end of the airways Upper Lima 607. So yeah, remember, if you have a long airway, Simbrief will only give you the beginning, the point where that airway starts, and the point at where that airway not finishes, where you come off that airway, and the point at which you join that airway. But Navigraph will give you all the intermediate points. So you see, we're joining Upper Lima 607, which is a long airway. So you're joining at Conan over here. The same airway has all these points all the way down to Matug. Okay, Conan and Matug, and that's what it gives you, Conan. And Matug is the one that we have Matug because we deleted a few. So we were originally getting up to Ritsu, but now we deleted everything after Matug. So Matug is the last one of this Upper Lima 607. So to amend this plan, we had Ritsu, we just put Matug, and then Rollis, we go in direct. There's an airway here, of course, because the airways started from the other point. It will not start from Matug. We delete this one, and this means that we're going direct from Matug to Rollis, which what we have here, Matug direct to Rollis. At this point, we analyze the route. If we've done everything correct, it tells you that it's valid. Like, you can generate the flight plan again. And that's it. Most of it is trial and error. If you mess it up, but remember, instead of trying to recover it, it's just easier to just redo a new flight, reload it from Simbrief. And that's it. In this case, we're loading the one that we've adjusted. I find it an invaluable tool. It's really, really, really good. One thing I use Navigraph as well for, like in airports with a lot of different departures and etc. Generically speaking, if I'm on VATSIM and I'm asking for clearance, sometimes you've filed on VATSIM, for example, the Det2 Foxtrot departure. When you ask for clearance, they might come back to you and say, yeah, you're clear to Frankfurt via the and you don't understand what start they've just given you. Sorry, what SID they've just given you. And I find it very useful to just open everything here. Open everything at departure, which is over here, departures, and that's it. And you have everything over here. So they might tell you max 1F departure. In this case, it would be definitely that 2F, but there might be two that go to the same place, so they might tell you to take a different one. And so at that point, instead of going like, I don't know what to repeat, you see directly what they meant, and you can sound a bit more professional, or like you know what you're actually doing. So that's another useful thing. Well, and the last thing to add about Simbrief is, well, last thing for today, there would be a lot more, but the last thing that I would like to point out is these three things over here. Print view PDF, it just simply does what it says on the tin, so it generates a PDF of your operational flight plan. You can save it over here somewhere, and it's very useful, for example, to bring it up from Avitab. If you have Avitab, you save this one onto the charts folder, or whichever folder Avitab uses. In this case, you see plugins, Avitab charts. You save it there. Once you're in your simulation, you can open this one in your simulation, so you don't have to switch windows, and you can read it on the Avitab by scrolling. The other thing is the pre-file flight. Of course, this is for VATSIM, so you click on this one, you choose the network, and it takes you to your VATSIM account. You can do it manually from Xpilot, but in this case it's all filled automatically with what you gave it, and you can just file the flight plan onto VATSIM, and that's it. There's no need to do it manually. And the third thing is the download FMS. So I personally like, for small flights, to enter everything manually onto the FMGS, but you can, many airplanes have the capability of loading flight plans, so you download the FMS. Different planes have different formats, so you need to know what format your specific add-on uses. So for example, you see Flight Factor 767, 777, they have this FLP extension, while the standard X-plane is FMS. Like for example, Zibo and Tolis will use the standard. At that point, you click on download, you save it onto your flight plans over here, and that's it. And then you have the title. So when you open in Tolis, for example, you do load flight plan, and it shows you. Some other add-ons, you need to just type it in and then say load flight plan. And that's useful as well if you have Active Sky. So you save the flight plan, and then you can load it in Active Sky, and you can load it in your plane, and that's all done. It loads automatically all the airways and the waypoints. It just doesn't load your departure, so you will still have to enter your departure runway and the SID, and then you need to enter your star and your approach and transition and via, and so forth and so on. And the very last thing, that is a question that came up on Discord, is, well, this one applies a bit to everything, but to all the planes. There was a bit of confusion as to what, let's load the old flight plan to go to, there we go, what the via and the transition meant, what to enter in via and transition. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand which one to choose, but very simply, the transition is the point at which your flight plan makes the transition onto the star, the arrival. So the transition will be this point. So you can just go and have a look. You normally open your star, and this blacker would be the transition. Okay, while the via will be, well, generically speaking, as long as they are connected, the star and the approach, generally speaking, your via would be the last point of the star, which is the first point. It's easier for me to think about it as the first point of your approach. This is easy to find because it's always here in between brackets, while it's not in brackets. The transition is not here indicated. Well, normally would be blacker. So you always find it. Sometimes the arrival might have a different name and might have different, especially in the States, I believe, The stars have a lot of different transitions. So the easiest way to find the ace transition is simply this last blue point, the blue point before the star. And the via is always in brackets over here, or you can just open and check. And again, here you see the transition can only be Tango, Romeo, November, but there might be the same approach chart that has one transition from here. Sorry, via, not transition. Via from here, one from there, one from there. So they might cover different ones. Okay, so that was a little bit confusion. Just to recap, transition is when you do a transition from your flight plan, direct line onto your star, and it's the waypoint immediately before the star, and via is the first point of your approach. In this case it's here in bracket TRN, and if you check is this point over here, TRN. And that should recap it all. If you have any questions, of course there will be tons of questions. As I said, I don't want to go too much into details because I could stay here planning half a day. But let's take it step by step. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I hope this is useful in some way. Thank you very much. Bye now.